Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast, brought to you by Marketing What's New. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we're completing our series on revenue operations. This is coming out in early 2023, the sunsetting of Universal Analytics and moving to GA4. More on that later. Let's get to today's show. So as I said, this is a series on revenue ops, and we can never forget that the marketing function sits inside the broader work of acquiring customers. The purpose of this series is to evangelize this relatively new framework so that everyone gets on board with it. Our guest today is currently Managing Director of the Revenue Enablement Institute, whose associates include previous guests like Neil Hoyne. He has held numerous C-level roles, including places like Oracle, SAP, Schneider Electric, Siemens, and United Rentals. And he's been CMO at 2 Fortune 500 companies. He worked outside of the US for 14 years in Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia. And throughout that, as he sat in boardroom meetings, he confronted key issues of performance and customer acquisition growth. This formed much of his thinking on the way that these functions should be run. And in 2022, he co-authored the book Revenue Operations, a new way to align sales and marketing, monetize data, and ignite growth. Please join me in welcoming from New York City, Chris Hummel. Chris Hummel, welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Appreciate you inviting me here.
Absolutely. So we're here to talk about a book that has recently come out, and I mean recent as in 2022, Revenue Operations, a new way to align sales and marketing, monetize data, and ignite growth. All right, that's a tall order for a book, but you maybe want to tell me just how the book came about and your co-author.
So the origin of the book are kind of funny in the sense of, so I co-wrote the book with Steve Diorio. Steve Diorio is the founder of the Revenue Enablement Institute and a longtime friend. And he kind of talks about us. We often try and go, I'm the practitioner. I've been a 2-time Fortune 500 CMO. He's the sort of analyst, academic, and he loves to use the Kirk-Spock analogy, where sometimes I guess I'm Spock, but usually he puts me as Kirk.
Right.
I don't know, an insult or a positive. But the idea was we actually set out with this incredibly lofty goal, which was to tell my story from my experience and his story from his experience in a way to try and inform the 21st century commercial model.
Yeah.
So we were actually looking to try and create a commercial model for the 21st century. And incredibly lofty, incredibly academic oriented. And the 5 people who would have bought the book, I'm sure would have been really, really enamored with it. Our publisher kind of said, well, wait a minute. I love the title and I love you guys trying to be ambitious with what you want to do. But this is too important and too practical. We need to put it in a package which is kind of more accessible, more digestible.
Right.
And so we went through the research. The term revenue operations kept coming up, and we both had encountered it. But the reality is there is no clear definition of what revenue operations is. Some people think it is, I'm going to take my marketing operations title, and I'm going to scratch out the word marketing, and I'm going to put in revenue, and all of a sudden I'm worth more. I have more value to my organization. Others go, this is my opportunity to go back to the 1980s and 1990s of business process reengineering, and we're going to totally shut down everything for 3 years, create work streams, do all that. Neither is an appropriate kind of framework to work under.
It's not cosmetic and it's not complete, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah.
Correct. Absolutely, Glenn. And that's, I think, where as we started to come to it and we started to identify revenue operations, to me, has always been more about the alignment of all your growth assets, of all the pieces to make growth, whether it means physical consolidation of teams or whether it means some other super bureaucratic kind of structure. It's getting that alignment between sales and marketing together. Just a little bit of personalizing this. I started my career as a sales guy at Oracle, carrying a bag, right, trying to sell software in crazy places in Eastern Europe. And after I did that for a while, and I did very well, my boss came to me, the head of the region, and said, "Hey, would you ever consider taking over marketing?" And I said, "What? Marketing? Come on." And he goes, "Look, I need a wolf in sheep's clothing." I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, I need a sales guy inside marketing."
Yeah, I need marketing to get sales.
To get sales, right? Yeah. And I need somebody who can talk and have that conversation. So, excuse me, when Stephen and I were looking at this, we said, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to find ways where sales and marketing and even service can all take themselves and align around a common purpose. And that purpose, in this case, being growth.
Yeah. So, and, at the risk of just repeating the recap, I think that I got from that out of the book was that you've pointed out that while each one of these functions have tried to move into the 21st century, when they're all trying to do it in that silo model, the companies are doing poorly. That marketing is facing ambiguity. Sales is, they kind of have the greatest touch out of all of them, but frankly, they don't know any more than anybody else about what's going on, despite the fact that, this is like diamonds right under their feet. And service is just neglected. And you say that without having a system that brings them together, you don't have a plan for growth.
So that was the ultimate point of the book. If I were going to change the title and kind of, make it less marketing, it would be about how to create a system approach to sustainable, scalable revenue expansion or growth.
Yeah, that's right. That's simple. And yet we're dealing with large organizations that are anything but simple.
Well, and that's where you talked about like sales, right?
Yeah.
So I've run large sales organizations and they know what's happening in a micro, right? At each individual account. Yeah. What I love about marketing and why I kind of lean my career towards there is you see more holistically. And then service actually sees what the customer is doing with the product. I mean, how important is that, right? And if you think about, let's take it from the marketing standpoint. Marketing people go, oh, look, I know more about what the customers are doing in aggregate. I have more information about what our brand perception is. I have all the data now. I have all the infrastructure, but they can't get to the table to actually be listened to by the sales guys who their unique pieces. They have the last mile to the customer, right? The sales teams. That's what they own. They don't own more information about the customer. They own the last mile. And even that is now being challenged. Like in my last marketing role at United Rentals, I actually owned the digital, the e-commerce. And all of a sudden that was displacing the sales team. And I was almost like, I can do this full cycle. Right?
Yeah.
I can do marketing, I can do the sales, I can do the service. I have to do it all. And that created even more conflict. And so the goal is that system for growth. And the biggest impediment is the friction of fragmentation and siloed organizations.
Yep, it certainly is. Great that you pointed out the fact that we can all be in each other's business now. We have this wonderful thing, technology has just gone in leaps and bounds and enabled anybody in any one of those three functions to have conversations at scale, to have information, where it could be best served in, increasing the amount of share of wallet for the customer, all these things. But if we just have a free-for-all kind of, grabbing all this technology, it's just going to be a royal mess. You say, as a matter of fact, that you see, we don't need more technology. We don't have to buy more necessarily. Most companies already have too many tools. We just need to use the tools that we have to better effect.
And so in that, what we suggest is there are three things to look at to try to do this, right? There is one is, what are the rules on the playground, right? How do we actually define what the roles between whatever groups are, whatever org structure? So the kind of the management or the governance system to just say, right, who controls what, who owns what, and then how do we agree together on our investments in growth and that kind of thing. But the part that you're starting to talk about then gets to the second big piece, which we call the kind of business operating system or the revenue operating system. And the revenue operating system traditionally is marketing will go out and say, I have a problem. I want to do content, or I want to do ABM programs, or I want to send out email or manage my social media. I'm going to buy an individual tool for whatever the thing that popped up in front of me is. And bang, whack-a-mole, I'm going to put another piece in, and then bam, I'm going to add another one. And if I'm really enlightened, I'm actually going to think about how I sort of sew them all together. And I'm great, right? Because I actually have I have integration in my system, and I go buy an integration tool to layer another tool on top of all the technology I have. And then all of a sudden I go, but I don't have all the financial data. I don't know what the customer is doing with my product. I don't know what my sales teams, I'm throwing stuff into their pipeline, but I'm not getting anything back about what people are actually buying or what's closing. And so then I kind of go further into my silo, and I go, oh crap, I need to do something with this. And now let me hire somebody to fix my technology. And even as they fix it, and the marketing operations teams are battling to kind of somehow support this and get implementations, then you find out you don't have the skill set. You don't have the people. You
hit that hurdle. Yeah.
You run into even more salespeople always talk about there's only so many apps I can have on a screen. Somehow salespeople are so dumb they can't take more than a couple tools. The problem hits everybody. My marketing teams would have problems in the number of applications which are hitting them. So sorry to bring this full back circle, but the revenue operating system, what we did was said, we're not going to go through a magic quadrant where we splinter into smaller and smaller.
You need one of these and one of those. Yeah.
You have 9 business functions that you need to solve. You need your channels. You need your sales enablement. You need your product. You need your customer data. And inside those, it doesn't matter whether it's sales, marketing, service, finance, whatever, you have to tie them together. And so the kind of one of the things we talk about is the team that connects the most dots will win. And that's the point of the revenue operating system. It's not about adding more pieces. It is inventorying what I have to make sure I have everything I need. And then it's actually about shedding some of the pieces that I don't need because I have redundancies across multiple areas.
So that's the revenue operating system and, how it should be used. And you make it abundantly clear through citing statistics that not many companies are there yet. The one that stuck out to me was 62%. This is from Forbes. 62% of marketing organizations are not leveraging the first-party customer data from their marketing systems in doing marketing planning and measurement. So, we have kind of dots to fill in within each sub-function within each of our orgs. And then we have to take on, connecting them across the different parts of the org. It's a lot of work. And it's so much work, in fact, that you devote roughly half of the book to not just the revenue function, but you kind of say, okay, well, we got to get this piece in here first. Which part is that?
Well, again, this is where the decision comes on every individual business. And so the third piece that we sort of introduced, there's the management system, there's the revenue operating system. The last piece we introduced was the smart action, the idea of a smart action. And the smart action is essentially a kind of a tactical micro disruption that just gives me some value now without trying to change the world, right? Without trying to solve world hunger or boil the ocean or whatever you want to do. And so it's little things like you're talking about, can't use my first party data. So one of the cases we cite in there is about intelligent response management. Sounds pretty basic, right? But the idea of actually getting data to the selling channel, whether that's a human being or the web or whatever else or partner, getting them real-time data to help them progress that deal. Okay, that doesn't sound like boiling the ocean to me, but sales can't do it without marketing. Marketing can't do it without service. Service can't do it without sort of the other pieces in there. And so you have to thread all that in. And our point is just start to connect the dots. Like allow the salesperson to get fed from what the marketing systems have. And that will make them, it's not going to make them superhuman, but it will make them more powerful. And so, and then if you connect that kind of that first piece, and then you move to the next piece, it says, okay, well, how do I enable my salespeople better? Now I have to think about my content systems, and I have to think about kind of my sales training, and think, okay, well, now I got human resources involved too, especially in big organizations. And how do I pull all that together? Because I worked for some of the best companies on the planet, and we ran into problems where human resources had its own sales enablement program, its training program. And then the sales teams had their own sales programs. And then the product teams would come in and go, no, I have a training program for you. And so the sales rep in that case, right? It's the same with marketing though, but I'm using this sales process, but I have this,
I've been outfitted 3 times for the same thing I have to do.
And everybody told me something a little bit different. And so as Steven, my co-author, often talks about, he goes, how do you control what this says? Meaning the mouth of the salesperson, right? When they're talking, or the finance person or the marketing person or whatever it is. How do you make sure that's consistent? Well, you can't until you start to string these pieces together. And I think that's wherever your first spot is, what we encourage people to do is, okay, look at the framework we've delivered, the revenue operating system, and either pick something that you think is a strength or pick something you think is a weakness. Sure. And kind of then go, okay, what do I have there? Do an inventory. Do I have Brain Shark, or do I have, whatever, Seismic, or do I have this? Well, have I brought in Gong? Have I brought in this? On the marketing side, okay, I already have Marketo, but now, Adobe's telling me to do this on the creative side, but Oracle's coming over here and telling me to do this. And then I have all these independent systems that are coming up. I got a lesson in tech. I'm a pretty technology savvy guy. I worked for Oracle, for SAP most of my life.
Yep.
And even I kind of go a little bit fuzzy-eyed when people start selling me all these things. But I used to get enamored, and I controlled, hundreds of millions of dollars of budget. And I would get enamored by somebody would come up to me with some solution to a problem. And I would go, yes, that's what I want. And what Stephen and I are trying to counsel people is that's great. And that can happen. And it's important to solve the hair on fire program. However, are you thinking about what it connects to in your existing world? And are you thinking about what the next step would be? Let's assume you're successful with this.
Yeah.
What do you do next?
Right. This is, and I think this is what the 2020s needs, because if we zoom back over the, first 2 decades of the century, we had, most people who realized they needed to put technology in and assemble a stack. They saw companies like, the marketing automation firms, they IPO'd. That caught people's attention. They're like, oh, I better get on this. Yet, what you're talking about, and especially the smart actions, is you're saying this is now how you bring better controls. And I don't mean controls in a, like we're a military organization and we're, we're years out of date. I mean nimbleness and agile controls so that we can make each of these tools provide exactly the actions that we want that face a changing world. Like one of the best analogies that I found in the book was when you described, you said, think of it like a car. So in a car, you've got your dashboard in front of you, and the car clearly has many different systems, and they're all tied into the dashboard. And you can manually control the brake system. You can control the how much the engine is working with your gas pedal. But you said the really advanced ways that it works now is the car's computer can look at across those systems, and it can tie, let's say, the suspension together with the way that it's accelerating and how much, air fuel mixture is going in. And you've got this little dial on a car, at least some cars do, called drive mode. And if you want it to, be a little sportier, or you want it more to the off-road, or you just change that dial, everything, there's multiple systems that are being touched when you do that, but you are now able to handle what the terrain is calling for. That just made perfect sense to me.
And so it was important for us to create that concept of there has to be a system that's working. Like you can adjust it and you can put your foot on the gas and go faster, but there has to be a kind of a balancing system that connects everything together. And with the car analogy, makes it sort of run. But an important part of that is, and think about now as dashboards on cars are getting more digitized, you can actually change and customize what you have on that screen in front of you, right? Yeah, I need to know my speed so I don't, drive dangerously or get a ticket. I need to know where my gas is so I don't get stuck. And is my engine overheating, and some basics. But, now you have like, okay, am I in econ mode or am I in comfort mode? And it sort of optimizes for that experience that I want. Well, we kind of said, okay, if you squeeze a balloon over here, it's going to pop out air over there. So you can at least kind of let the other group kind of know what's going on. And it still allows you to control. And we've had a couple of questions where people said, well, aren't you just making my company vanilla? Like, aren't you just making me like everybody else? My technology is my, competitive differentiator. And my use of information is my secret sauce in terms of
my killer app. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Fantastic. Right. But we still all need to get around, and we still all need to recognize that there is a system. You can call it an ecosystem if you want to be kind of, light touch about it. But we thought about it actually more as almost like an operating system for a computer, where it actually sends out kind of these commands to the rest of the business to keep it in balance. And then what you do is how well your operating system is set up. Is it complete? Most people, we would argue, not complete. When we talk to 100 leaders, more than 100 leaders, CXOs, CMOs, CEOs, et cetera, we found some great companies doing something. Fortive Business Systems, WalkMe, Juniper, Cisco, AT&T, all these people, Salesforce, that are doing some interesting, as companies, not as vendors, but as companies.
Yes.
But none of them were complete. Like none of them had actually what I would call implemented a full revenue operating system. What they had done is they had initiated the signals that this is where they were heading. And when we talked to them about, okay, but what if you connected it to these pieces? The collection of those interviews, that's what gave us the picture. There was no one like paragon of success. And so each of them was saying, okay, I got a couple areas here I got to fix. And there's a couple other here that are my secret weapon that I want to enhance and I want to make better and differentiate. Fantastic, right? That's great. There you go. There's your secret sauce. It doesn't mean that, we don't have infrastructure. We don't have common kind of processes.
I'm taking a moment to talk about the new Google Analytics. In early 2023, the in-person GA Fast Forward workshops will happen in Ottawa, Kingston, Montreal, as well as across upstate New York. You can go now and see registration details or get notified when it's happening in your area. Just go to gafastforward.com, spelled as you'd say it, or GAFast, the number 4, then WARD. Let's get back to the conversation. There were two phrases that you came back to when we were talking about, getting nimbler and how you deploy this. These may be the two metrics maybe that fit those two situations. You said some are doing it to reduce overhead and some are doing it to increase speed. So I think the overhead, that might be the one where if I and my competitors all have a similar cost base, I have to get these systems to do things in a more efficient way, or else I'm just going to be priced out. The example that I saw in the book, and it got accelerated by the pandemic, was needing to take stuff that had formerly been with a direct sales force and flip it into a online portal model. None of us thought in 2020 we were going to need to do that, but all of a sudden we did, right? So that's the kind of reduce overhead, and I think you showed it to beautiful effect there. Tell me about like the increased speed, because some of the things that you're talking about, they sound like science fiction when you show the smart actions, but they really can shrink the speed incredibly.
Oh, massively. And I think, where people get kind of confused is they think, I need the whole thing, like to operate. I need, maybe the difference to the car analogy is if you don't have wheels, you can't go anywhere on a car. Yeah. In our case, well, actually, you can still do something even if you don't have the equivalent of the wheels, because there are other advantages. There are things you can still do. It's incomplete. It's not total. For most people, so this book is it was interesting also in terms of who we targeted. At first, we targeted the executives. And, we wanted the executives. But the executives have purview over the whole organization in many ways, or allocate resources. We really started to focus then on, but what does the marketing operations analyst do down there in the basement, right? Or what does the program manager who's trying to drive demand? Or even heaven forbid, the event manager, right, that's trying to build a new hybrid kind of experience that you were talking about. And so there's a piece which appeals to everybody, which is, as you said, the operational efficiency, the cost savings. If I can get rid of a couple of things, if I can get, sort of move on, if I can lower some costs over here, maybe I can use that over there. For a lot of marketing organizations, unfortunately, as soon as you save money, somebody else takes it and goes and does something with it. But
yeah, we'll come back to that.
But that said, what I found, and it goes back to a mantra my old boss had, Larry Ellison, where he said, to do more, I have to do less. And I never understood exactly what he meant, but what he meant, and what I learned from my career was actually, wow, this is pretty prescient of him, is you have to kind of quiet the number of moving pieces so that you can move fast in the things that you want to do. And so part of what we're trying to create here is, if I can reduce the number of systems I have doing the same thing, I get rid of all this friction. I get rid of friction, and I'll give you a great example. So we talk a lot about content in the book, and we talk about whether it's sales training or whatever. There's sales content that they create and use. There's advertising, even in the marketing side. Let's just take the marketing side. I have advertising content, but then I have different content that goes into my marketing programs or my demand generation. Often I have different content which is optimized for the web for my search. And then I often have different content which I pass on to sales. And so because everybody is generating different pieces of content. Now multiply this. And when I mean content, I mean messaging and value proposition. Now go over, sales is doing the same thing. And the funny thing is, I actually had at United Rentals, I had the supply chain team creating their own messages. So the supply chain team at United Rentals is sort of creating their own marketing messages. So what we said was, look, you've got to create a kind of a core messaging platform, whatever it is. Whoever drives it doesn't matter. But go and execute that across the entire organization. And if you can do that, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to get rid of various infrastructure systems to back up the content. You're going to reduce the number of variables in the content, and then you're going to make sure everybody is consistent. Well, if everybody is consistent, I can now actually get my message out faster. I'm not fighting with competing messages. So it seems almost a little like, but wait a minute, now everybody has to learn a new system. No, just have less messages, right? Fewer messages, and your messages will get out there faster. And everybody more efficient at it. Like, oh, well, that's kind of obvious. Okay, yeah, so let's go do it.
I was going to say, yeah, if it's not being done right now, maybe it isn't so obvious. or there are impediments. And I think this is a perfect time to get into, I look at them as near term and far term. And you certainly address this when you're talking about the management system. But as part of that, finance and being able to justify the investment for this, I identified very strongly with some of the shots that you fired at finance, and you definitely sympathize with people who have not been able to make these intangible values that we get out of connecting the dots tangible, and yet they are. So one, you point out the, focused on increased financial accountability. It's good. You welcome it. And, you say that anybody in marketing and sales and service should be open about being held to things. But you say the way most organizations measure and calculate the performance of their gross investments is flawed. Simple revenue attribution measures favor short-term actions. And, we're not seeing the long-term actions. You say a CFO will choose a short-term investment with clear attribution over a profitable long-term investment, that especially when it requires different organizations to work together, right? Because we're probably not going to find all the budget for it in one department's budget. So now we have to deal with this. And I know we can't, settle it over an arm wrestle with our CFO. I would like to, but what do you suggest we do to try to overcome this natural impediment of, financing? Well, according to the many century old systems and ways we count things, what you're asking for isn't going to make us money. Like, how do we get that message across? And then how do we make this so that we can actually move into a revenue operations world?
It's an incredible conversation that, as I said, I started my career in kind of technology and moved to more industrial, not quite Luddite, but more industrial, where marketing and even technology was not necessarily there. So first of all, let's not pin this on the CFO or the financial team and say, like, they just don't understand. Actually, what the kind of the conversations that they're having about, if you can give me something short term that I know delivers revenue and has attribution versus something that's long term, my risk profile is going to clearly lean towards the left, right, or towards the one that's short term. It doesn't mean that it's the only thing that I do, but at least I'm going to lean that way. Okay, and a lot of times, what particularly marketers will do is marketers will go in and say, yeah, but the future and the this and the this and open that and it's
and the Kool-Aid.
It's a much stronger message. And you go, okay, look, let's just understand, if I'm talking, let's go back to 101. If I'm talking to a customer, I need to make sure the customer understands, not that I say the right thing, but that the customer understands what I say. So I have to be able to put marketing in financial terms. And I need to be able to create that in such that the organization can absorb it. I've sat in boardrooms where enlightened board members will say to me as the CMO, and they'll go, Chris, I just want to know, I put in $1 marketing, what do I get out? And I go, okay, fine. I can never give you that number. Oh, well, sales can. No, they can't. And they go, well, what do you mean sales can? Of course they can. I know, and the sales guys will get up and go, if I hire 10 salespeople, I know that's going to bring me on average, $10 million, and it's going to cost me this much. And I go, it's only going to cost you $10 million, or it's only going to generate that if you maintain your product quality, if your marketing stays out there, if your quality,
if your lead flow continues at a current rate.
If your lead flow continues, because if I hand over a business card that's blank, it's a very different thing than if I hand it over and I say, I work for, name your company, right?
Excellent point.
P&G or whatever else.
Right.
People aren't going to take the meeting. How do I calculate in my lead flow people who didn't even take the meeting? Right? Like, I don't, because I don't put that in there. I'm a sales guy. I never get outsold. I want high win rates. So I'm only going to put the ones that are in there. Same with marketing. We only want the ones that have high attribution. So our BANT criteria, business authority need timeline, is sort of And so what do you do? So my practical approach to it is, first of all, you have to find a common language with your counterparts in the selling channels, and whatever that is. You have to find a common way and stop the, I need more leads, says sales. Marketing delivers more leads. You're not doing anything with them. Oh, that's because the leads are crap. No, it's your,
that doesn't solve anything.
You need to find a way. And the reality is what's happening with sales right now is they are, I would call it, encroaching on the marketing territory, because they're realizing, actually, it's weird. In one ways, it's the worst time to be a marketer because you're under the most pressure. But in other ways, it's the best time because what you do is more valued than ever, in the sense of with contactless, with digital, you have to reach customers in different ways. You have to do it without having a human connect to them. So it's like, that's what marketing has always, tried to do, is be able to sell on, right? And so my first suggestion is, one, find some kind of language with your salespeople. One of the things I did way back when I was running marketing in Asia for Oracle and my counterpart in Europe, we came up with something called the demand generation board. Okay, kind of sounds very authoritative and bureaucratic. The whole thing of this demand generation board, it's one of the case studies in the book, actually,
yes. Yep.
is we simply created a forum for sales and marketing and product and service to sit down once a quarter and have a conversation about what our go-to-market strategy, what our growth strategy was, how we were going to make money. And we would provide some data up front, and we would do some marketing research, and marketing was the host because we did the sort of the background work, and we made sure the coffee was hot for everybody who was there and all that kind of stuff, right? But the idea of actually sitting in a room together, what normally happened, I went through the swing of, where the local regions own the marketing budget. And
this is the scenario that we've got.
Scenario, right?
We've got areas, and it's higgledy-piggledy. They're not consistent across. Correct. And they're now dealing with global customers who themselves are comparing notes and saying, correct, well, that's not the answer, or that's not the price.
Why? Wait a minute. Now you've taken it away from me. You don't understand. And so my tactic was, I went to all my leaders in Asia Pacific and I said, I'll tell you what, here's how much money I have for demand generation, right? It was about 50, 60% of my budget, whatever.
Yep.
And I said, you guys, if you can come back to me and tell me unanimously how you want to use it, I'm good.
Wow. Yeah.
Like go right ahead.
Well, so who's not going to take that meeting?
And so everybody goes, all right, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I'm in. Yeah.
Open sheet clothing, right? He's got it. He understands. And so they couldn't figure it out. And so they would start pointing to each other, and the product guy would go, well, I want this product. And the other guy would go, but I need a cash cow. And the other one, I need profit. And they couldn't do it. And they'd eventually turn to me and go, well, what do you recommend? And I'd go, well, based on the data and the conversations we've had, here's the, allocation that I would recommend. And we tweaked it a little bit. And then everybody had their fingerprints on it. So that's it
is. And you're being a little Machiavellian, I think, because if I read where you're going, what we're going to find is this is a good, like a proto revenue operation idea. But you say you got to take it up to the C-level. Because what will happen is they will figure out that they can't do it on their own. They can maybe inch forward, but it's not going to be nearly enough. Right. So you advocate very strongly. We've got to then, and what a better way than to get them all going as one to the CEO's office and saying, can you get involved on this? This is going to take you. Right.
So the challenge that we found, Glenn, was if you look at the current situation, if you looked at who is the top growth officer in any given company.
Yeah.
Right? Who's the person that decides?
If you like made it a pie and you said who has the biggest slice of the growth pie.
So we show a Venn diagram, I think, in the book, right?
Yeah.
Where, okay, this is what marketing controls, this is what service, this is what sales controlled, but here's the overlap, and here's where all three overlap. And so eventually what you get to is, okay, well, if none of them control more than a certain amount, who is it? Elevates to the CEO.
Yep.
And the CEO or the business unit head or whatever the sort of, The challenge for them is their role. Yes, you would think they're the strategic growth person and all that, but they have all kinds of fiduciary responsibilities, organizational responsibilities. When you get up to a certain level, 50% of your time is spent on administrative tasks, HR tasks, finance tasks.
Yeah.
They don't have all the information, and so they're looking for somebody else. So we create the three different models of there's a person in charge, what we call the czar. There's a federation, which I talked about at Oracle. I created this federation of how do I get everybody to talk together? And then there's the third, which is the sort of chief of staff, or what we call the RevOps rock star, which is, okay, I can't get all these bozos to talk together, but at least what I'm going to do is from the bottom, I'm going to create consistent data, consistent recommendations. I'm going to pull all the material together. I'm going to lay off processes that I can't decide how to allocate our growth capital, but at least I can compare it in a consistent way so that sales can't just go, just because I control the last mile, this works, versus marketing that says something else. And so I can't tell you specifically, I have a preference as to which model I like to operate in.
Sure.
But all three are valid models as long as you can get them to connect together.
And they connect together. I guess if we look at it from an org chart standpoint, you do favor there being one person who nominally has control of them all, and this is where the CXO title fits in.
Correct, and that's what we call the czar. But, there is what we see more movement, interestingly enough, from when we started the book about a year ago to when we kind of handed in the copy. The increase in the number of people with revenue operations in their title on LinkedIn went up 3x. So the reason in particular we put in that chief of staff kind of, and you can think chief of staff as, okay, a senior vice president or vice president, or even at a more localized level, is because what's happening is a lot of people are going, it's too many egos and too much to sort of fix the thing at the top. But if I fix the thing at the bottom, get the process here, get the revenue operating system in place, I can still have multiple leaders kind of feeding into it or feeding off it.
I agree. And you hear different words. I mean, I've heard a center of excellence. I've heard office of the chief blank officer. So, it doesn't have to be this, superhuman person, but the idea is that there has to be a reporting structure and KPIs that will hopefully come down to just a few, or ideally even one growth metric that, that whole part of the organization rallies around.
And so, Glenn, if you indulge me for a second, I said that the title of the book was originally the 21st Century Commercial Model. And why did we go down that path? One of my old professors, Sumantra Ghoshal, rest in peace, from London Business School, wrote a lot about the sort of 19th century European model, where the way they would handle, or even pre that, the way they would handle complexity in their business is they would have managing directors essentially out in the outposts.
Yes.
So the head of India was basically the head of the whole business in India.
Yes.
And all they had to do was report the results back to the headquarters and pay the levy or the tax or whatever. Then the 20th century came and the American model started to dominate, which was the corporate structure. So now everybody feeds up to the corporate structure. You saw globalization of marketing. You saw globalization of other functions because, they're not experts in brand and I need to control those guys out in Singapore or wherever.
Lots of boxes.
Lots of boxes, right? So lots of org charts and all this. And everybody would go, well, it doesn't matter whether it goes like this or it goes like this. We're all one team. One team was a code word for me. If somebody said, you're not being one team, it just means I didn't agree with them. It didn't mean that I was playing badly. Just my one team is different than their one team in kind of very personal terms. So what's actually happening, and you can look at a larger part of society, is the sort of, the distributed commerce, the kind of headless kind of commerce where you get now gig economy, collaborative, like all these kind of things where there's porous structures that that can be malleable a little bit. And so part of what we're saying is why we wanted to crush the silos was crush the 20th century silos, which was marketing, sales, and all that. Because what happens is if I'm the head of marketing and I have done this the bad way and I've done it the right way, I optimize for what I'm tasked with. I don't optimize for the whole. I optimize for what I'm tasked with. So if lead generation that has the Bant criteria answered a specific way, I mean, this is kind of old school stuff.
True. Yep, we'll hit it, even if it means gaming it.
Even if it means, especially if it means gaming, because then I can sort of get away with it, right? And then I can do my pet projects, or I can try and do all the stuff around the side. Now, I was always looking over at the sales side and spent too much time trying to tell the sales guys what to do, and got myself in hot water a few times. And then somebody put me in charge of the sales guys, and I actually made it work.
Well, that fixed that.
Well, it was interesting because it was an early version when I worked for a carve out from Siemens, a company that eventually called Unify. We rebranded them. I was given the role of chief commercial officer, and I had global sales and marketing reporting to me, and everybody was like, "You've been bitching about this for decades. Like, go make it happen." And we tripled market share. We did all kinds of interesting things. It wasn't all me; it was the team.
Sure,
but the concepts of revenue operations were all there. And even if you look at, I talked about some of the industries like industrial and that kind of thing. There used to be a role called the chief commercial officer. There still is sometimes, or a chief commercialization officer. Or you talked about a chief of staff. A lot of times in software companies, they'll have a chief of staff role or something. And the role of that person is to pull all the pieces together and make sure that, well, if I'm commercializing a product, I have to think about the product quality, the usage, the launch of it, the sales channels. I have to think about all this. I don't make the decisions, but my job is to sort of pull it all together. Well, now with technology, it's not that those roles are obsolete, but that those roles can be created in an operating system kind of that works not as a black box, but you can lay it out so that the company can operate like that, not just have a person thrown at the problem, but the company actually operates like that. And if you can move towards that, you're not going to have the full revenue operating system. We probably got another 50 years, right, to see, hopefully less, but where you'll start to see some companies emerge that way. And obviously new companies have a better chance at it, but you'll start to see people move in this direction, but you will start to see them operate on this as a de facto. Breaking down the silos between the functions. You still have to master the individual functions. In marketing, you got to have people understand branding. You got to have people understand demand generation. You understand, customer sentiment and follow a life cycle. But you got to move towards where you operate interdependently.
Sure.
And that's kind of where this 21st century model idea came up.
Well, and there's a carrot and a stick to this. I mean, you could stick with, the current model, but if your organization is in a field, the business examples from, Blockbuster to Kodak, they all get mentioned. But, if you do that and your organization isn't set up like an operating system where it's looking to revise itself, the only thing that's going to necessitate you changing your operating system is when the underlying business model for your whole company is out of date, right? And we see it, maybe we see some harsh layoffs or we see the complete demise of the org, but, do you really want to be set up that way where it takes, literally, a sheriff with a padlock and, a couple of accountants showing up saying, yeah, you're done? Or would we rather have a responsive type of organization like you guys write about that, says, we're not exactly sure where things are going, but we want to be adaptable?
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, Glenn. You've nailed it. I would go one step further where what we're also trying to do is provide tools to people to get started.
Yeah.
So recognizing that, some in the organization, many will say, well, I don't have control over our organizational structure. I don't have control over how we do it. Okay.
Or they just plain old don't like change.
I got it. Well, look, the change is probably the number one thing that sort of hurts here, but there are individuals who want to do it.
True.
They want to be empowered, right? And so as a leader, I was looking, there's smarter people out there, a lot smarter people out there on the ground than me. How do I empower them to make the right decisions and bring the right ideas forward in that? And so again, this goes back to, you don't need the complete, it's not like a linear step of I must have all 9 boxes of the revenue operating system done and I need to do. You can actually start at a really, really tactical level. And we give I don't know, half a dozen or a dozen specific smart actions in the book. But actually, one of the interesting things that a couple of people have asked us is they said, well, when I come up with my own smart action, how do I share it? And so we were like, what do you mean? And they said, almost like open source software. How do we come back? You guys have given us very interesting kind of, examples and templates, but there's 15 more we could have put in the book. I mean, the stories we have are endless in terms of all these great companies. And then there's people, as they read it, it's now been out when we're recording this about a month, people are saying, well, I have my own stories. How do I tell it? How do I, and we're like, so right now, one of the things we're trying to figure out is actually how to give people a voice where they can actually start to share those kind of ideas together. Because I know I would steal with pride. I mean, if somebody gave me a great idea, I'll take it and use it. Thank you very much. And off we go. And we all, I'm sure your audience, 99% want us all to be more successful, right? They want to help their peers in other places. They want to sort of course, it's just human to be like that.
Yeah, there is abundance out there. But I love that, that is a true way to look at it as an operating system. And, in every industry that we have, operating systems are, either the number one or one of the top few options that everybody has. And you're absolutely right that in any one of those OSs, I can go on the internet and there are recipes that other people have put together saying, well, we did this on it and it worked for us. So, I love your idea of a future where we're sharing that. It certainly makes change a lot less scary. And I don't see any real competitive reasons not to. It's, because you could find something that someone in a totally different industry has done to hack their, sales enablement function. And, it doesn't, like you say, steal with pride. It doesn't take anything off of them if you put it in place in your own company. So, yeah, that's a future I want to be in.
You can give me a recipe for some kind of sauce and I'll go into the kitchen and I'll love it and I'll whip it up and I'll do very well. But you give me a recipe to bake something and I'm clueless. It doesn't matter, right? It's going to fall apart. So,
yeah.
It's
not the recipe all by itself.
The recipe by itself, but that's the sharing of the idea. But then I need to internalize it, make it work. You talked about change. Very often part of the change is it's the middle management, not the it's not the field, it's not the top, it's the middle.
Yeah.
And so I know when I've dealt with different structures, Oracle was very command and control kind of this. SAP was a little more oligopoly. United Rentals was, Schneider Electric was more a cabal at the top. And then United Rentals was really the regions. And you have to change how I executed all my plays to map to what the organization's strengths were. I mean, sometimes it was a weakness, but sometimes it was a strength and had to map to it. So even given the same smart action, right, one company will implement it different than the other. And how two companies in the same space, how fast they get to it, how quickly they can do it, how well they do it, that's still going to be the difference between winning and losing, right, or that kind of thing. So that's why we were really excited about this idea of, okay, what's the governance structure? That's the management structure. What's the operating system? That's how all the pieces kind of fit together. And then these little tails of smart actions that when chained together, we never got a way to put in the word carbon chain. Somehow in the book we wanted because I can talk about hydrogen, talk about oxygen, but H2.
Oh, yeah, I gotcha. But the smart actions, you tack on to the end of them, you say that they all result in something that you can detect on the firm's financial performance. And that's a really important thing. That's like almost think of it as making it sustainable, right? So we did this little thing, and not only did the customer outcome change, which drove a business outcome change, that business outcome actually was quantifiable in dollars. Now we can go and, who's going to turn us down when we say we've got another one in mind? Let's do this one next.
And here's a little trick from the field. When I talked about the board meetings I sat in, sometimes they would go, okay, how is an investment in X, a new TV ad campaign, a new digital selling platform? How does that turn into firm value? And you sort of go, well, I can't give you the 1 = 3 and all that.
Yeah.
He said, let's go down the chain. And this is Stephen. It's all him. This is actually how he and I met. He had something called the revenue value chain. And he said, okay, if I do one activity, it's going to change something inside my company, some competitive differentiation, some value proposition. That value proposition is then going to change some sort of customer behavior. The more interest with that customer behavior change is ultimately going to lead to more purchases, more revenue, more this, more that. Okay, does everybody agree if the customer behavior changes that all the rest of the sequence of things are going to happen? They go, yeah, of course. If customers buy more, our revenue goes up and does it. Okay. So where the trick here, because if I have to prove the whole chain, it's very expensive, very long, whatever. But if I find the place of disbelief, if I find the place that says, you don't believe that if I do this ad campaign, it's actually going to improve our value proposition, or you don't believe that if I actually invest in a digital selling platform, that it's going to change customer behavior, we're going to get more transactions out of it. Okay, well, let me focus my research dollars and my KPIs around that little leap of faith. Instead of the whole chain, I'm just going to focus there. And they were like, great, right? If you can prove this little gap in the process, we'll buy the whole thing.
Yeah.
All right.
And a simple test. I mean, we can always, marketers do testing all the time. That would be a very easy thing, if you look at skill sets, that's very easy to put in place.
In our wheelhouse. That's right.
Yeah. And, but I love how, because we get the horse before the cart, we get the cart before the horse. We say, I need the money. And, I'm sure this is where the board just, like eye rolls and goes, okay, here they go again. But, doing it in the order that Steve has recommended, that's the real way to, build this up. And after they see some proof there, you will be invited in for the next time where you need to say, okay, now we want to do other things.
Yep, absolutely.
Chris, if people want to find out more about the book or more about the Revenue Enablement Institute, where can they go?
Well, obviously, you can just come to the Revenue Enablement website, www.revenueenablement.com. By all means, reach out. Stephen and I both have our emails on there. Mine is chummel@revenueenablement.com. Reach out to us directly. We would love to engage in a conversation. We'd love to hear about the kind of the smart actions or the successes and the failures that people are having, right? Because these are signals that we've identified, and we think, given the amount, we've identified something that's really tangible for people to use. But we want to improve it as well. And this is not a world where the book comes out and then it's set in stone. We actually want to have an ongoing dialogue with people and help them realize it. So that's the best place to go for information.
That's perfect. And I appreciate that. We'll have those links in. To the listener, there's parts of this book that we just didn't have time to cover, but I encourage you to check it out if this is part of what you see as being your long-term value in an organization. I hope that you can find organizations that will listen to what Chris and Steve have argued for. We have to really look at this and the revenue operations model. And I hope you came away with something that helps you make your funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.